After being abandoned by her boyfriend in the parking lot, Maria thought nothing worse could happen. But the next day, when she opened her front door, she saw a black SUV parked and felt a chill down her spine when she found the note. "You need to hear this." Maria adjusted her uniform as she left the supermarket. Her shift finally over. The sky was already dark, and the parking lot was mostly empty. Peter was with her. He leaned against his old car, staring at his phone, barely acknowledging her. Maria walked over, trying to suppress the tiredness in her voice. "Hey, Peter," she said, forcing a smile. "Thanks for waiting." Peter looked up, his face expressionless. He shoved his phone into his pocket. "Yeah, whatever. We need to talk." Maria felt her stomach drop. She knew that tone. "About what?" she asked cautiously. Peter opened the car door and gestured for her to get in. Maria hesitated but then climbed into the passenger seat. He slammed the door after her, walked around, and got in himself. The silence in the car was thick, Peter's fingers tapping on the steering wheel as he started the engine. "You're always complaining, Maria. Nothing's ever good enough for you, is it?" Peter finally said, his voice sharp. Maria blinked, caught off guard. "What? I don't understand. What are you talking about?" "Don't act stupid, Maria," Peter snapped, turning his head to glare at her. "You're always complaining about my work, about my friends. You can't just let things be, always nagging." Maria could feel the heat rising to her face. "Peter, I'm just trying to look out for you. You're out every night. You never tell me what's going on." Peter laughed, a cold sound that made Maria's skin prickle. "You don't get it. You never have. Maybe I should find someone who does." The words cut deep, but Maria tried to stay calm. "Peter, please, I'm not trying to fight. I just want us to be okay." Peter shook his head, his face twisted with frustration. "Get out." Maria stared at him, not sure she'd heard right. "What?" Peter's eyes were hard as he stared straight ahead. "Get out, Maria! I can't deal with this anymore." Maria's heart pounded as she realized he was serious. She swallowed, her throat dry. "Peter, it's late. I can't just—" "I said get out!" Peter shouted, pounding the steering wheel with his fist. Maria flinched, her hand already on the door handle. She opened the door, stepping out into the cold night air. Before she could say anything more, Peter pulled the door shut and sped off, leaving her standing in the empty parking lot. The taillights of his car disappeared into the darkness, and Maria felt the weight of the silence around her. She looked around, the parking lot now completely empty, just her and a few parked cars. Her breath came out in shaky bursts as she tried to steady herself. The humiliation burned in her chest, and she fought the tears that were already welling up. She wrapped her arms around herself and started walking. It was a long walk home. She had no money for a cab, and her phone was almost dead. Maria kept her eyes forward, the shadows around her growing as she walked away from the shopping center. Her thoughts were a mess. How had it come to this? Peter had always been distant, but this was different. This was cruel. Finally, Maria reached her small neighborhood. The streetlights were dim, casting just enough light to see the familiar path to her house. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, letting out a long breath. The house was quiet. Too quiet. She walked to the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and sat down at the small kitchen table. Maria stared at her phone, tempted to call her sister. But what would she say? That Peter had left her in a parking lot like she was nothing? Maria shook her head, blinking back the tears. She couldn't let her sister see her like this. Not again. She set the phone down, resting her forehead against her hands. It had been a long day, and all she wanted now was sleep. She got up and headed to her room, collapsing onto her bed without even changing out of her work clothes. She closed her eyes, trying to forget Peter's cold stare, the sound of his voice. She just wanted it all to be over. The morning came too soon. The sunlight peeking through the curtains forced Maria out of bed. She sighed as she got up, her body feeling heavy from the lack of sleep. She walked into the bathroom, splashed water on her face, and tried to push away the exhaustion. Today would be different, she told herself. It had to be. She dressed quickly, grabbed her bag, and opened the front door. Her heart stopped for a moment. Parked directly in front of her house was a black SUV. The windows were tinted, and the engine was off. Maria stared at it, the unease settling in her stomach. She didn't recognize the car. It definitely hadn't been there yesterday. Maria glanced up and down the street. No one was outside, the neighborhood still quiet in the early hours. She tried to shake off the feeling of dread, telling herself it was nothing, just a coincidence. She locked her door and began to walk to the bus stop. She couldn't help but look over her shoulder. The SUV still there, parked silently. At work, Maria tried to keep herself busy, ringing up customers, organizing shelves, anything to keep her mind off the black SUV. But the image kept coming back. Who was it? Why were they parked in front of her house? She sighed as she scanned another item, the beeping of the register almost drowned out by her own thoughts. "Hey, you okay?" asked her co-worker, Anna, breaking Maria out of her thoughts. Maria forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine, just tired." Anna nodded, giving her a sympathetic look. "If you need a break, just let me know." Maria nodded, grateful, but she knew a break wouldn't help. The unease from this morning had settled deep in her bones. After her shift, Maria made her way back home, her steps slowing as she approached her street. Her heart sank when she saw it, the black SUV still there, parked in the exact same spot. And there, on her front door, was something else. A piece of paper, fluttering slightly in the breeze. Maria walked up to the door, her hands trembling as she pulled the note free. It was a simple piece of paper, just one line written on it. "You need to hear this." Maria's throat tightened, her eyes scanning the street, but there was no one around. She crumpled the note in her hand, her heart pounding. She didn't know who was doing this, but she knew one thing for sure. She was scared. That night, Maria sat in her living room, her eyes glued to the window, watching the black SUV through the thin curtains. She couldn't see inside, couldn't tell if anyone was there. She hugged her knees to her chest, her mind racing. Who was watching her? What did they want? She grabbed her phone and dialed Peter's number. It rang, and rang, and rang, but he didn't pick up. She tried again, her frustration growing, but still no answer. Maria let out a shaky breath, throwing her phone onto the couch beside her. She had no idea what to do. Calling the police crossed her mind. But what would she say? That a car was parked outside her house? They'd probably tell her it was nothing. Maria closed her eyes, trying to calm herself. She needed to sleep. She needed to think clearly. But as she lay down in her bed, the fear wouldn't leave. It settled in her chest, heavy and suffocating. The last thought she had before sleep finally took her was that she needed to find out who was behind this, and she needed to do it soon. Morning came, and Maria felt the weight of another sleepless night. She dragged herself out of bed, the sense of dread still clinging to her from the day before. She forced herself to get dressed and eat a quick breakfast, but her thoughts were all focused on one thing: the black SUV outside her house. She pulled back the curtains and peeked outside. The SUV was still there, parked in the exact same spot. Her heart pounded as she stared at it. The dark, tinted windows gave nothing away. It felt like whoever was behind it was playing some kind of game with her. Maria knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. She opened her door slowly, stepping outside. The morning air was cold, and the neighborhood was still quiet. She walked down her porch steps, her eyes never leaving the SUV. She was nervous, her heart beating faster with every step she took. She stopped on the sidewalk, staring at the car. She didn't know what she expected to see: movement, a face in the window, anything that would give her a clue. But the SUV just sat there, silent. Maria decided to ask her neighbors if they knew anything. She walked over to Mrs. Lopez's house next door. She knocked softly, and after a moment, the door opened. "Maria, what brings you here so early?" Mrs. Lopez asked, her face lined with concern. "Hi, Mrs. Lopez. Sorry to bother you, but have you noticed that black SUV out front?" Maria pointed to the car. Mrs. Lopez stepped out a little, squinting at the SUV. She shook her head. "No, can't say I have. It wasn't there yesterday, was it?" "It was," Maria said, swallowing hard. "It's been there since yesterday morning." "I don't know whose it is." Mrs. Lopez frowned, looking at Maria. "You should be careful, dear. You never know with strange cars. Maybe call the police." Maria gave a small smile, trying not to show her fear. "Yeah, maybe. Thanks, Mrs. Lopez." She walked back to her house, feeling more alone than before. No one seemed to know anything. And calling the police still didn't feel right. They would dismiss her. She was sure of it. Maria stood in front of her door, her eyes again on the SUV. Something about it felt wrong. She could feel it in her gut, and she trusted that feeling. She shook her head and unlocked her door, stepping inside. She needed to get to work, needed something normal to hold on to. She grabbed her bag and headed out to the bus stop, glancing over her shoulder one last time at the black SUV. It was still there, like it was waiting for her. At the supermarket, Maria struggled to keep her focus. She rang up customers, her hands moving automatically, but her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was going to happen. "Maria!" A voice snapped her out of her thoughts. She looked up to see her manager, Mr. Costa, frowning at her. "Sorry, what?" Maria said, blinking. "I said you've been staring off into space for 10 minutes. Are you okay?" Mr. Costa asked, his eyebrows drawn together. Maria forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just didn't sleep well." Mr. Costa sighed, nodding. "If you need to take a break, go ahead. Just don't let it affect your work, okay?" "Of course," Maria said, grateful for his understanding. But even as she went back to work, she couldn't get her mind off that SUV. When her shift ended, Maria walked back home, her steps heavy with dread. She turned the corner onto her street, her heart sinking. The SUV was still there. Not only that, but there was something taped to her front door again. Maria walked up to her house, her eyes locked on the note. Her hands shook as she pulled it free. This time it said, "You need to hear this." The same words, but written more urgently, like a warning. Maria's hands trembled as she looked at the SUV, then at the note. She couldn't do this anymore. She needed answers. She ran into her house, slamming the door behind her, her heart pounding. She grabbed her phone and dialed Peter's number again. It rang and rang and rang. No answer. Maria let out a shaky breath, her eyes stinging. She felt trapped. Trapped in her own house. Trapped in her fear. She knew she couldn't stay like this. She had to do something. Anything. The next morning, Maria woke up early. She had barely slept again, but today she was determined. She got dressed, pulled back the curtain, and wasn't surprised to see the SUV still there. She walked out of her house, her eyes on the vehicle. She pulled her phone out of her pocket and started taking pictures of it. She circled the SUV, snapping shots of the license plate, the windows, everything she could. If something happened to her, she wanted someone to know. As she walked around to the passenger side, she noticed something. The window was slightly open. Maria froze, her eyes narrowing. There was something inside, something wrapped in a piece of cloth. Her curiosity got the better of her. She reached out, her hand trembling as she moved closer to the window. Just as her fingers touched the edge of the glass, a loud blaring sound erupted. Maria jumped back, her heart racing. The SUV's horn blared again. Then it started to move. Maria stumbled back as the vehicle sped off, the tires screeching against the pavement. She watched as it disappeared down the street, her hands still shaking. She looked around, her neighbors now poking their heads out of their doors and windows, staring at her. Maria took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. The SUV was gone, but for how long? Later that day, Maria heard a knock on her door. She opened it, and her breath caught in her throat. It was Peter. He stood there, looking disheveled, his eyes avoiding hers. "Peter, what are you doing here?" Maria asked, her voice shaky. "I need to talk to you," Peter said, his voice low. "About everything." Maria stepped back, letting him in. He walked into her small living room, pacing back and forth. She watched him, her unease growing. "Look, about the other night," Peter began. "I'm sorry, okay? I was out of line." Maria crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "Out of line. You left me in a parking lot, Peter." I know, Peter said, running a hand through his hair. "It was messed up, but there's more going on. Stuff I can't really talk about." Maria felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean, stuff? Are you involved in something, Peter?" Peter shook his head, his eyes still not meeting hers. "I can't. It's better if you just stay out of it." "Stay out of what?" Maria's voice rose. "Is it about the SUV? Do you know who's been watching me?" Peter looked at her. Then, his face paled. He opened his mouth to say something, but then closed it, shaking his head. "Just drop it, Maria. It's not safe." Maria felt her anger flare. "Not safe. Peter, I've been terrified for days. You can't just come here and tell me to drop it." Peter finally met her eyes, and for a moment, Maria thought she saw fear there. Real fear. He opened his mouth again, but then his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his face going even paler as he read the message. "I have to go," Peter said, his voice barely a whisper. "What? Peter, wait." Maria reached out, but he was already at the door, opening it and stepping out. "Just be careful, okay?" Peter said, his eyes meeting hers one last time before he turned and walked away. Maria stood there, her heart pounding, the door still open. She watched as Peter disappeared down the street, the fear in his eyes still haunting her. Whatever was going on, it was bigger than she thought, and she knew, deep down, that this wasn't over. Maria woke up with a knot in her stomach. She felt exhausted, her mind heavy from the night before. She got dressed and pulled back the curtain, glancing outside. Her heart sank. The black SUV was still there, parked right in front of her house, just as it had been for the past 2 days. Maria couldn't take it anymore. She needed answers. She grabbed her coat and stepped outside. Her eyes locked on the SUV as she walked down the steps. She crossed the street, heading towards her neighbor, Mrs. Lopez. She hoped that maybe someone had seen something, anything, that could help her understand what was going on. Mrs. Lopez opened the door after the second knock, her face lighting up when she saw Maria. "Maria, dear, how are you?" Mrs. Lopez asked, her eyes kind. "Hey, Mrs. Lopez," Maria said, trying to force a smile. "I need to ask you something." Mrs. Lopez nodded, stepping aside. Come in, Maria shook her head. "Actually, it's about that car." She pointed at the SUV parked across the street. "Have you seen it before? Do you know whose it is?" Mrs. Lopez squinted at the SUV, her brow furrowing. She shook her head slowly. "No, I haven't seen it before. Is it bothering you, dear?" Maria nodded, swallowing the fear that had built up in her chest. "It's been there for a couple of days. I don't know whose it is, and it's making me nervous." Mrs. Lopez frowned, looking at Maria with concern. "Maybe you should call the police, dear. You can't be too careful these days." "Yeah, I'm thinking about it," Maria said, her voice trailing off. She didn't want to admit that she didn't feel safe even doing that. She gave Mrs. Lopez a small smile. "Thanks, Mrs. Lopez." Mrs. Lopez patted her arm gently. "You take care of yourself, Maria. Let me know if you need anything, okay?" Maria nodded, forcing another smile. "I will. Thanks again." She walked back to her house, her eyes darting to the SUV again. It felt like the car was staring at her, even though she couldn't see inside. She went back inside, locking the door behind her. Later that afternoon, Maria decided she needed to do more than just ask questions. She grabbed her phone and stepped back outside. Her heart pounded as she approached the SUV, her eyes scanning every detail. She took a few steps back, lifted her phone, and took a picture. She moved around, taking pictures from different angles, making sure she got the license plate. Maybe she could look it up or have someone help her. As she circled to the passenger side, she noticed something. One of the windows was slightly open. Maria's heart skipped a beat. There was something inside the car. It looked like a small package, wrapped in cloth. Maria squinted, leaning in a little closer, trying to see what it was. Her hand moved instinctively, reaching towards the open window. Before she could touch the car, a loud blaring sound erupted. Maria jumped back, her heart racing. The SUV's horn blared again, and suddenly the car took off, the tires screeching as it sped down the street. Maria stood there, frozen. Her hands trembled, her eyes wide. She turned, seeing her neighbors stepping out of their houses, looking at her. She quickly lowered her phone, turning back towards her house. She felt the weight of their stares, the embarrassment creeping up her neck. She didn't know what to do now. That night, Maria was sitting in her living room, staring out the window. She couldn't stop thinking about the package in the SUV. What was it? Who was it for? Why had they just left it there? Her mind kept spinning with questions, each one more unsettling than the last. Her phone buzzed, breaking her from her thoughts. She picked it up and felt her stomach twist. Peter's name flashed on the screen. She answered, her voice shaky. "Peter?" "Hey, Maria." His voice was soft, almost hesitant. I wanted to apologize for the other night." Maria felt her anger flare. "You left me alone, Peter. In the middle of a parking lot. You can't just call and apologize like it's nothing." "I know," Peter said, his voice cracking. I messed up, but I need to talk to you. There's more to this." Maria felt her heart pound. "More? What do you mean?" "Can I come over?" Peter asked. Maria hesitated, her mind screaming at her not to trust him. But she needed answers. She needed to know what was going on. "Fine. Come over." Peter arrived half an hour later, looking tired and disheveled. Maria opened the door, letting him in. He walked past her into the living room, his eyes darting around like he was expecting something to jump out at him. "What's going on, Peter?" Maria asked, her voice sharp. Peter turned to her, his eyes wide. "You have to stay out of this, Maria. It's dangerous." "Stay out of what?" Maria snapped. "Is it about the SUV? Do you know who's been watching me?" Peter ran a hand through his hair, his eyes avoiding hers. I can't say much. But you need to trust me. Just leave it alone." Maria's frustration boiled over. "Leave it alone." "Peter, I've been terrified. Someone's watching me, and you're telling me to just ignore it." Peter stepped closer, his eyes finally meeting hers. "I'm trying to protect you, Maria. You have to believe me." Maria shook her head. "I don't believe you, Peter. You're hiding something." Before Peter could say anything else, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face went pale. He turned towards the door, his voice trembling. "I have to go. Just, please, stay out of it." "Peter!" Maria called after him, but he was already gone, the door slamming behind him. Maria stood there, her heart pounding, her mind racing. Whatever Peter was involved in, it was dangerous. And it was clear that she was now a part of it too, whether she wanted to be or not. The next morning, Maria woke up with a sense of determination. She was done being scared. She was done waiting for answers. She got dressed, pulled back the curtains, and looked outside. The SUV was back. Maria's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. She stepped outside, walking towards the car. She needed to know what was going on, and she was tired of feeling powerless. She pulled out her phone, snapping more pictures. She circled the car again, her eyes scanning every inch. As she moved to the back, she noticed something else, a new note, tucked under the windshield wiper. Maria's breath caught in her throat. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she pulled the note free. It was a simple piece of paper, with just one line. "He didn't tell you everything. Be careful who you trust." Maria's hands shook as she stared at the words. She looked around, her eyes darting up and down the street. There was no one in sight, just the quiet houses and the empty road. She crumpled the note in her hand, her fear turning into anger. She was done being scared. Whoever was behind this, they wanted her to be afraid. They wanted her to feel powerless. But she wasn't going to let them win. Maria turned, heading back into her house. She needed a plan. She needed to find out who was behind this, and she needed to do it now. Maria woke up early the next day, her mind already racing. She glanced out the window, her heart sinking when she saw the black SUV again. It was parked even closer now, almost directly in front of her gate. Maria clenched her jaw. She had to figure out what they wanted. She got dressed, her hands trembling as she buttoned her shirt. She needed to stay calm, needed to think clearly. She walked out of her house, keeping her eyes on the SUV as she locked the door behind her. She felt like she was being watched, every move scrutinized. The bus stop was a short walk away, but today it felt endless. The whole way, Maria could feel the weight of the SUV's presence behind her. It was almost suffocating. She couldn't even glance back without feeling her chest tighten. The day at work was a blur. Maria tried to stay focused, but every time she looked at the entrance, she half expected to see someone there, someone watching her. It felt like she was losing her grip on reality, the fear clouding everything else. Anna, her co-worker, came up to her during a slow moment. "You okay, Maria? You look exhausted," Anna said, her voice full of concern. Maria forced a smile. "Yeah, just not sleeping well." "You know, stuff going on at home." Anna nodded, her eyes softening. "If you need anything, just let me know, okay? You don't have to handle everything alone." Maria felt a pang in her chest. She wanted to tell Anna everything, wanted someone else to know what was happening, but she couldn't. It would just make everything feel more real, and right now, she wasn't ready for that. "Thanks, Anna," Maria said instead, her voice barely above a whisper. When Maria got home that evening, her heart stopped. The black SUV was still there, but this time, it wasn't empty. She could see a silhouette in the driver's seat, someone sitting perfectly still. Maria's breath caught in her throat. She hesitated on the sidewalk, not sure if she should go closer or turn around and leave. Before she could decide, her phone buzzed. Maria pulled it out of her pocket, her eyes widening when she saw it was a call from an unknown number. Her thumb hovered over the screen before she finally pressed answer. "Hello?" she said, her voice shaky. There was no response. Maria could hear breathing on the other end, deep and slow. Her heart pounded in her ears, her hand trembling. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice cracking. The breathing continued, but still, no one spoke. Maria felt the panic rising, her hand clenched tight around the phone. "If you don't say something, I'm hanging up," she shouted, but the words felt empty. The line went dead. Maria stared at her phone, her heart pounding, her body trembling. She looked up at the SUV, but the silhouette inside was gone. The driver's seat was empty again. Maria swallowed, her throat dry. She turned and walked quickly to her front door, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the keys. She managed to get inside, slamming the door shut behind her, locking it quickly. She leaned back against it, trying to catch her breath. She felt trapped. The walls of her small house seemed to close in around her, suffocating her. The next morning, Maria woke up to the sound of knocking on her door. She jumped up, her heart pounding. She looked out the window, her breath catching when she saw Peter standing on her porch. He looked disheveled, his hair a mess, his face pale. Maria opened the door slowly, staring at him. "What do you want, Peter?" Peter looked at her, his eyes filled with something Maria couldn't quite place. Fear, regret, something else. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice low. Maria stepped back, letting him in. He walked inside, pacing back and forth in her living room, his hands trembling. Maria crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "What's going on, Peter?" Peter stopped, looking at her. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it, his eyes darting to the floor. He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a shaky breath. "I messed up, Maria. I got involved with some people I shouldn't have." Maria felt her stomach drop. "What kind of people, Peter? Is this about the SUV? Are they watching me because of you?" Peter looked at her, his eyes filled with guilt. "They're dangerous, Maria. You need to stay away from this. Stay away from me." Maria's anger flared. "Stay away. Peter, they've been outside my house for days. They're watching me." "You can't just tell me to stay away." Peter stepped closer, his voice urgent. "I'm trying to protect you. Maria, you have to trust me. Just drop it, okay?" Maria shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't drop it, Peter. I'm scared. I don't know what to do." Peter reached out, his hand resting on her arm. I know you're scared, but I can't fix this. You have to trust me." Maria pulled away, her eyes filled with anger and fear. "I don't trust you, Peter. Not anymore." Peter looked at her, his face pale. He opened his mouth to say something, but then his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, his face going even paler as he read the message. He turned to leave, his voice barely a whisper. "I have to go. Just be careful." Maria watched as he left, her heart pounding. She felt more lost than ever, the fear tightening around her like a vice. She knew one thing for sure. She couldn't trust Peter. Not now. Not after everything. That night, Maria sat on her couch, her eyes glued to the window. She watched the black SUV, her heart pounding with every minute that passed. She knew she couldn't live like this, couldn't live in fear. She had to do something. She had to take control. Her phone buzzed, breaking her from her thoughts. She picked it up, her breath catching when she saw the message. It was from an unknown number, just one line. "He didn't tell you everything. Be careful who you trust." Maria stared at the words, her hands trembling. She looked out the window, her eyes narrowing at the SUV. She felt the fear turn into anger, the panic turning into determination. She wasn't going to let them control her anymore. Whoever was behind this, she was going to find out, and she was going to end it. The next day, Maria made a decision. She couldn't keep living in fear. She had to confront whatever was happening. She stepped out of her house, her heart pounding as she walked towards the black SUV. She needed to see who was behind this, needed to confront them. She walked around the SUV, her eyes scanning every detail. She moved to the driver's side, her hand reaching out towards the handle. She was done waiting. She was done being scared. Before she could open the door, the engine roared to life. Maria jumped back, her heart pounding as the SUV sped off, leaving her standing there, breathless. She watched as it disappeared down the street, her fear replaced with a growing determination. She turned and walked back to her house, her mind set. She was done being a victim. Whoever was behind this, she was going to find out, and she was going to fight back. Maria woke up with a new determination. She knew she couldn't keep letting fear control her. Today, she was going to get answers. Peter knew more than he was letting on, and she was going to make him tell her everything. She quickly dressed, her hands steady as she buttoned her shirt. There was no room for hesitation anymore. She grabbed her phone and called Peter. It rang twice before he answered. "Maria." Peter's voice was groggy, like he had just woken up. "We need to talk. Now," Maria said, her voice firm. Peter sighed. Maria, I told you to stay out of it. It's dangerous. I don't care, Maria snapped. You need to tell me what's going on. You owe me that much. I'm coming over. Before Peter could argue, she hung up. She grabbed her coat and left the house, her eyes lingering on the empty spot where the SUV had been. For once, it wasn't there. But Maria knew it was only a matter of time before it came back. She had to do something before it was too late. When Maria arrived at Peter's apartment, she pounded on the door, her heart racing. Peter opened it, his face pale. He looked at her, his eyes widening slightly. "Maria, you shouldn't be here," Peter said, glancing around nervously. "I'm not leaving until you tell me what's going on," Maria said, pushing her way inside. She stood in the middle of his living room, her arms crossed over her chest. "Start talking." Peter shut the door, running a hand through his hair. He looked exhausted, his eyes bloodshot. He paced back and forth, his hands trembling. "Maria, it's not that simple," Peter said, his voice low. "I got involved with some people, dangerous people. I didn't think it would get this far." Maria felt her stomach twist. "What do you mean, dangerous people? Who are they?" Peter shook his head, his eyes filled with regret. "I can't tell you that. But they're watching me, and now they're watching you too. They think you know something." "Know what?" Maria demanded, her voice rising. "I don't know anything, Peter. Why are they watching me?" Peter looked at her, his eyes filled with guilt. "I used you, Maria. I told them you had information. I thought it would buy me some time. I didn't think they'd actually come after you." Maria's heart stopped. She felt the room spin, her legs feeling weak. "You used me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You told them I knew something to save yourself." Peter reached out, his eyes filled with desperation. "Maria, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I thought I could fix it before they did anything." Maria stepped back, her hands trembling. "You put me in danger, Peter. You put my life at risk." "I know," Peter said, his voice cracking. "I'm trying to fix it. I'm trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Maria laughed, the sound harsh. "You think this is protecting me? I've been living in fear for days, Peter. You did this to me." Peter looked down, his shoulders slumping. "I know, and I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. I just need time." Maria shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't have time, Peter. They're not going to stop. They're watching me. They know where I live. What am I supposed to do?" Peter looked at her, his eyes filled with something Maria couldn't quite place. Fear, regret, maybe even love. "Just stay low, okay? Don't talk to anyone. Don't do anything to draw attention. I'll handle it." Maria felt the tears spill over, her body trembling. She turned and walked towards the door, her heart pounding. She stopped, her hand on the doorknob. "If anything happens to me, Peter, it's on you." Peter's voice was barely a whisper. "I know." Maria left Peter's apartment, her mind racing. She felt betrayed, hurt, but most of all, she felt angry. Peter had used her, put her in danger to save himself, and now she was the one paying the price. She needed to find a way out of this, needed to protect herself. As she walked down the street, her phone buzzed. Maria pulled it out, her eyes widening when she saw the message. It was from an unknown number, just like before. "He's lying to you. You need to leave." Maria's hands shook as she read the message again. Who was this? Who was watching her? sending her warnings. She felt her stomach twist, the fear settling deep in her bones. She couldn't trust Peter. She couldn't trust anyone. She needed to get out of here. That night, Maria packed a small bag. She didn't have a plan, didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay. She needed to get away from Peter, from the SUV, from whoever was watching her. She needed to disappear. She looked around her small house, her heart aching. This was her home. She had worked so hard for it, had put everything she had into making it hers, and now she had to leave it all behind. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She picked up her bag and walked to the door. She opened it slowly, her heart pounding. She stepped outside, the cold night air hitting her face. She looked around, her eyes scanning the dark street. The SUV was back. Maria's heart stopped. It was parked right in front of her house, the headlights off, the windows dark. She felt her hands shake, her breath coming in short bursts. She couldn't leave now. They were here. They were waiting for her. She backed up, slamming the door shut, locking it quickly. She leaned against it, her body trembling. She was trapped. She couldn't leave, couldn't stay. She didn't know what to do. Her phone buzzed again. Maria pulled it out, her eyes widening when she saw the message. "You can't run. They'll find you." Maria felt her knees give out, her body sliding down the door until she was sitting on the floor. She stared at the message, her heart pounding. She couldn't run. She couldn't hide. They were going to find her, no matter what she did. The next morning, Maria woke up on the floor, her body aching. She hadn't meant to fall asleep, but exhaustion had finally taken over. She got up slowly, her mind foggy. She needed to think, needed to figure out her next move. She pulled back the curtain, her eyes narrowing at the SUV. It was still there, parked in the exact same spot. She felt a surge of anger, her fear turning into determination. She couldn't keep living like this, couldn't keep letting them control her. She grabbed her phone and called Peter. He answered on the second ring. "Maria!" Peter's voice was filled with concern. "We need to meet," Maria said, her voice steady. "I need you to tell me everything. No more lies." Peter sighed. "Maria, I already told you." "No," Maria cut him off. "You haven't told me everything. I know you're hiding something. If you want to protect me, you need to be honest." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Peter spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Okay. Meet me at the old factory on Green Street. I'll tell you everything." Maria hung up, her heart pounding. She grabbed her bag, her eyes locking on the SUV. She was going to end this. One way or another, she was going to get the answers she needed. Maria's heart pounded as she left her house, her bag slung over her shoulder. She glanced at the black SUV parked in front, her eyes narrowing. She knew they were watching her, and today she was done being afraid. She was going to meet Peter at the old factory, and she was going to get the truth. The SUV sat there silently, the dark tinted windows giving nothing away. Maria walked down her porch steps, her eyes never leaving the vehicle. She felt her palms grow clammy, her breathing shallow. She had no idea who was inside or what they wanted, but she was tired of waiting for something to happen. She needed to take control. She started walking, her pace quickening as she got farther from her house. She had barely made it halfway down the block when she heard it, the sound of an engine starting. Maria's heart skipped a beat. She turned her head slightly, her eyes catching the black SUV pulling away from the curb. It was following her. She clenched her jaw, her eyes straight ahead. This was it. This was her chance to end the fear, to end the game they were playing with her. She walked faster, her heart pounding as she made her way to the bus stop at the corner. The SUV followed, staying at a distance but never letting her out of sight. Maria glanced at her phone. She opened the Maps app, her fingers shaking slightly as she typed in the address of the old factory on Green Street. She needed to be smart. She needed to lead them somewhere she could confront them. Somewhere she wouldn't be alone with Peter. The bus arrived, and Maria quickly boarded, her eyes scanning the street behind her. The SUV had stopped, parked on the other side of the road. Maria sat near the back of the bus, her eyes on the window as she watched the SUV shrink in the distance. She had to stay one step ahead. The factory on Green Street was an old, run-down building, covered in graffiti and surrounded by overgrown grass. Maria stepped off the bus, her heart pounding as she looked around. It was quiet. Too quiet. She pulled her coat tighter around her, her eyes scanning the empty lot. Peter had told her to meet him here, but she didn't see him. Maria took a deep breath, her fingers clenching around the strap of her bag. She couldn't back down now. She walked towards the factory, the gravel crunching beneath her feet. She reached the entrance, her hand hesitating on the rusted door handle. She glanced around one more time, but the lot was empty. She pushed the door open, the hinges creaking loudly. Maria stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. "Peter?" she called, her voice echoing through the empty space. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, she heard footsteps, slow and deliberate. Maria turned, her heart pounding, her eyes widening as she saw a figure stepping out of the shadows. It wasn't Peter. The man was tall, wearing a black coat, his face partially obscured by the hood. He stopped a few feet away from her, his eyes locked on hers. Maria felt her breath catch, her body tensing. She didn't know this man, but she could feel the danger radiating from him. "Who are you?" Maria demanded, her voice shaky. The man didn't answer. He reached into his coat, pulling out a small envelope. He held it out to her, his eyes never leaving hers. Maria hesitated, her mind racing. She slowly reached out, taking the envelope from his hand. She glanced down at it, her fingers trembling as she opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, with one line written on it: "He lied to you. He's not who you think he is." Maria looked up, her eyes narrowing. "What does this mean? Who are you talking about?" The man didn't respond. He turned and started walking away, his footsteps echoing in the empty factory. Maria felt her heart pound, her hands shaking as she watched him disappear into the shadows. Maria stood there, her mind reeling. Peter had lied to her. She knew he was hiding something, but now she had proof. She needed to find him. She needed answers. She turned and hurried out of the factory, her heart pounding as she stepped back into the cold air. She glanced around, her eyes narrowing as she saw it. The black SUV parked across the street. The man from the factory had left, but the SUV was still there, watching her. Maria felt the anger rise in her chest. She was done being afraid. She was going to get to the bottom of this once and for all. She walked across the street, her hands clenched into fists. She could feel her fear bubbling just beneath the surface, but she forced herself to keep moving. She stopped in front of the SUV, her eyes locked on the dark tinted windows. The window rolled down slowly. revealing a man she had never seen before. He was older, with gray hair and a stern expression. He looked at her, his eyes cold. "Get in," the man said, his voice calm. Maria hesitated, her heart pounding. Every instinct told her not to trust this man, not to get in that car, but she needed answers, and this was her only chance to get them. She took a deep breath and opened the door, climbing into the passenger seat. The door shut behind her, the sound echoing in the silence. The man looked at her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "But you shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice low. Maria swallowed, her hands trembling. "Who are you? Why are you following me?" The man glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "We're trying to protect you. Peter is dangerous. He's not who you think he is." Maria felt her stomach twist. "What do you mean? What has he done?" The man looked straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "He's involved in something dangerous, something that could get you killed. We've been watching him, and we've been watching you, trying to keep you safe." Maria shook her head, her mind racing. "Why didn't you just tell me? Why all the secrecy?" The man turned to her, his eyes hard. "Because Peter would have killed us if he knew. He's more dangerous than you realize, Maria. You need to stay away from him." Maria felt her heart pound, her chest tightening. Everything she thought she knew was falling apart. She didn't know who to trust, didn't know what to believe. She looked at the man, her voice trembling. "What do I do now?" she whispered. The man looked at her, his expression softening slightly. "You stay away from Peter. You let us handle this. We'll make sure you're safe." Maria nodded slowly, her mind spinning. She felt lost, like she was drowning in a sea of lies and secrets. She had no idea who was telling the truth, but she knew one thing. She couldn't keep living in fear. She needed to take control of her own life, no matter what it took. The man dropped Maria off a few blocks from her house, telling her to be careful and to stay out of sight. Maria walked the rest of the way, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She needed to figure out her next move. She couldn't trust Peter, couldn't trust the people following her. She needed to rely on herself. She reached her house, her eyes scanning the street before she stepped inside. She locked the door behind her, leaning against it, her body trembling. She knew this wasn't over. The danger was still out there, lurking in the shadows. But Maria was done being afraid. She was done being a pawn in someone else's game. She took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing. She was going to confront Peter, one last time. She was going to get the truth, no matter what it took. Maria spent the next morning gathering her thoughts, planning every word she would say to Peter. She felt a nervous energy coursing through her veins, a mix of fear and determination. She knew today was the day she would confront him. She was tired of the lies, tired of the shadows following her. She needed the truth, no matter what it was. She left her house, her heart pounding as she walked through her neighborhood. The streets were quiet, the sun just beginning to peek through the clouds. Maria made her way to Peter's apartment, her feet moving on autopilot as her mind focused on what she needed to do. She reached his door and knocked firmly, her heart pounding. It took a moment, but finally the door opened, revealing Peter. He looked disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. He blinked at her, his expression a mix of surprise and fear. "Maria, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice rough. Maria pushed past him, stepping into his apartment. She turned to face him, her eyes hard. "We need to talk, Peter. No more lies. I want the truth. all of it." Peter shut the door, sighing heavily. He looked at her, his shoulders slumping. "Maria, I already told you." "No," Maria snapped, her voice rising. "You haven't told me everything. I know you're hiding something, Peter. I've had people following me, leaving me notes, telling me you're dangerous. I need to know the truth." Peter stared at her, his eyes wide. He opened his mouth to speak, but then closed it, his gaze dropping to the floor. He ran a hand through his hair, his body tense. "Maria, it's complicated," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Complicated?" Maria laughed, the sound harsh. "You put my life in danger, Peter." "You lied to me. I deserve to know why." Peter looked up at her, his eyes filled with pain. He took a deep breath, nodding slowly. "Okay, you're right. You deserve to know." He gestured for her to sit down, and Maria reluctantly sat on the edge of the couch, her eyes never leaving Peter. He sat across from her, his hands clasped tightly together. "I got involved with some people," Peter began, his voice low. "People I shouldn't have. It started off as just a way to make some extra money. I didn't think it would get this far." Maria felt her stomach twist, her hands clenching into fists. "What kind of people, Peter?" Peter hesitated, his eyes flicking to the door as if he expected someone to burst in at any moment. "They're dangerous, Maria. They're part of an organization. They deal with information, sensitive information. I got in too deep, and when I couldn't give them what they wanted, I told them you had it." Maria's breath caught in her throat. "You told them I had what? What are they looking for?" Peter swallowed hard, his eyes filled with regret. "They wanted information about a deal, something that went wrong. I was supposed to get it, but I didn't. I panicked, and I told them you had it. I thought I could fix it before they came after you." Maria stared at him, her heart pounding. "You used me. You put my life at risk to save yourself." Peter closed his eyes, his face filled with pain. "I know. I was desperate, Maria. I didn't think they'd actually come after you." Maria stood up, her body trembling with anger. "You lied to me, Peter. You made me a target." Peter stood up too, his hands reaching out to her. "I'm trying to protect you now, Maria. I'm trying to fix it." Maria stepped back, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't want your protection, Peter. I want the truth." Peter looked at her, his face pale. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, there was a loud pounding on the door. Maria's heart stopped, her eyes widening as she turned to look at the door. "Peter, open up!" a voice shouted from the other side, the sound muffled but urgent. Peter's eyes widened, his face going even paler. He looked at Maria, his voice trembling. "You need to hide. Now." Maria shook her head, her heart pounding. "Who is it, Peter? Who's out there?" "It's them," Peter said, his voice barely a whisper. "They've found us." Maria felt her body go cold, her mind racing. She looked around the small apartment, her eyes darting to the hallway. Peter grabbed her arm, his grip tight. "Please, Maria," he whispered. "You need to trust me. Just this once." Maria hesitated, her heart pounding. She didn't know if she could trust Peter, but she knew one thing. If she stayed here, she would be in even more danger. She nodded, pulling away from Peter and running down the hallway, ducking into the small bathroom. She closed the door, her hands trembling as she locked it. She pressed her ear to the door, her heart pounding. She could hear Peter talking, his voice muffled. She couldn't make out the words, but she could hear the fear in his voice. Then there was a loud crash, the sound of something breaking. Maria covered her mouth, her breath coming in short, shaky bursts. She heard more voices, angry, demanding. She closed her eyes, her body trembling. She needed to stay calm. She needed to think. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. Maria stayed in the bathroom, her heart pounding, her ears straining to hear what was happening. She heard footsteps, the sound of doors slamming, and then silence. She waited, her body tense, her mind racing. Finally, she heard the front door slam shut, the sound echoing through the apartment. Maria waited a moment longer before slowly unlocking the bathroom door. She opened it a crack, peering out into the hallway. The apartment was quiet. She stepped out of the bathroom, her eyes scanning the small space. The living room was a mess. Furniture overturned, papers scattered everywhere. And there, in the middle of the chaos, was Peter, sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. Maria's heart sank. She walked over to him, her footsteps soft. "Peter," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Peter looked up, his eyes filled with tears. He shook his head, his voice breaking. "They're not going to stop, Maria. They're going to keep coming after us." Maria knelt down in front of him, her eyes hard. "Then we fight back. We end this." Peter looked at her, his eyes filled with something Maria hadn't seen before. Hope. He nodded slowly, his hands still trembling. "Okay, we'll end it. Together." Maria took a deep breath, her mind set. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to let fear control her anymore. She was done being a victim. She was going to fight, and she was going to win. The morning after the chaos at Peter's apartment, Maria sat on her bed, her thoughts racing. She knew things had changed. She couldn't go back to her old life, couldn't pretend everything was normal. She had to protect herself, and she had to do it on her own terms. Maria took a deep breath, grabbed her phone, and dialed her boss's number. She had been thinking about this for a while, and now she knew it was the right thing to do. "Mr. Costa," she said, when he picked up. "Maria?" Mr. Costa's voice was surprised. "What's going on?" "I need to resign," Maria said, her voice steady. "Effective immediately." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you sure, Maria? You've been a great employee. Is there anything I can do to change your mind?" Maria shook her head, even though he couldn't see her. "No, Mr. Costa. I need to make some changes. Thank you for everything." Mr. Costa sighed, then spoke softly. "I understand, Maria. I wish you all the best. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." Maria thanked him and hung up. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had loved her job, but now it felt like a part of a life she was ready to leave behind. She needed a fresh start, needed to create a new routine that would give her the space to feel safe again. Maria spent the next few days making changes. She found a new job at a smaller store on the other side of town. It was a quieter place, less crowded, and it gave her the sense of calm she desperately needed. She also started changing her daily habits, taking new routes, keeping a lower profile, and making sure she was always aware of her surroundings. Her new job allowed her to keep her distance from her past. She kept her interactions limited to polite greetings and small conversations with her coworkers. There were no personal questions, no deep connections. It was lonely, but it was safe. And right now, that was all Maria needed. One evening, after her shift, Maria decided to reach out to her sister. She hadn't talked to her in weeks, too embarrassed to admit everything that had been happening. But she needed support, even if she couldn't tell her the full truth. "Hey, Maria, it's been a while," her sister, Anna, said cheerfully when she answered the phone. Maria smiled, a genuine smile that felt foreign on her face. "Hey, Anna. Yeah, it has. Sorry I've been distant. Things have been a bit crazy lately." "I figured," Anna said, her voice softening. "You sound tired. Are you okay?" Maria hesitated, not wanting to burden her sister with the details. "I'm okay now. Just needed some time to figure things out." "Well, you know I'm always here for you," Anna said. "Why don't you come visit me for a few days? Get away from everything." Maria closed her eyes, the thought of being with her sister warming her. She needed that comfort, needed to be surrounded by family. "Yeah," Maria said, her voice breaking a little. "I think I'd like that." Over the next few days, Maria started to feel a sense of normalcy creeping back into her life. The black SUV had disappeared, as if it had never been there in the first place. The absence of its looming presence allowed her to breathe easier, though the fear never fully left her. One afternoon, Maria was at her new job, stocking shelves, when a voice behind her startled her. "Maria!" She turned quickly, her heart pounding, and her eyes widened when she saw Peter standing there. He looked different, less disheveled, more in control. But his eyes were still filled with something Maria couldn't quite place. "What are you doing here, Peter?" Maria asked, her voice cold. Peter stepped closer, his expression earnest. "I need to talk to you. I know I don't deserve your trust, but I want to make things right." Maria stared at him, her heart pounding. Part of her wanted to tell him to leave, to tell him she was done with him and his lies. But another part of her, the part that still remembered the good times, the part that remembered the man she had once loved, wanted to hear him out. "Fine," Maria said, her voice steady, "but not here. Meet me at the park after my shift." Peter nodded, relief washing over his face. "Okay, I'll be there." The park was quiet, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grass. Maria sat on a bench, her eyes scanning the area as she waited for Peter. She saw him walking towards her, his hands in his pockets, his head bowed slightly. "Thanks for meeting me," Peter said as he sat down beside her. Maria didn't respond. She just looked at him, waiting. Peter took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers. "I want to apologize for everything. I know I put you in danger, and I know I lied to you. I was scared, and I made the wrong choices, but I'm done running. I want to fix this." Maria frowned, her eyes narrowing. "How? How do you plan on fixing this, Peter? You can't just undo everything that's happened." Peter nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "I know, but I've been working with someone who can help us. They know the people who were after us, and they have connections. If we work together, we can make sure they leave us alone. For good?" Maria stared at him, her mind racing. She didn't know if she could trust him, didn't know if he was telling the truth, but she could see the sincerity in his eyes, the desperation. He was trying, in his own way, to make things right. "I need to think about it," Maria said finally, her voice soft. Peter nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "I understand. Just know that I'm here, and I want to help." Maria stood up, her eyes locked on Peter. "I hope you mean that, Peter, because if you're lying to me again, This is the last time you'll ever see me." Peter looked up at her, his eyes filled with emotion. "I swear, Maria. No more lies." Maria nodded slowly, then turned and walked away. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know if she could ever fully trust Peter again. But she knew one thing. She was stronger now. She was taking control of her life, and no one was going to take that away from her. That night, Maria sat on her bed, her mind swirling with thoughts of Peter, of the black SUV, of everything that had happened over the past few weeks. She felt the weight of it all pressing down on her, the fear, the uncertainty, the betrayal. But as she sat there, she realized something. She wasn't the same woman she had been before. She had changed. She had faced her fears, had confronted the people who had tried to control her. She had taken her life back, piece by piece. And she wasn't done yet. Maria picked up her phone and dialed her sister's number. When Anna answered, Maria smiled. "Hey, Anna, I was thinking I'd like to come visit, maybe for a little while." Anna's voice was filled with warmth. "I'd love that, Maria. Come whenever you're ready." Maria hung up, her heart feeling lighter. She was ready. Ready to move forward. Ready to leave the fear behind. She knew it wouldn't be easy, knew there were still challenges ahead, but she also knew she wasn't alone. She had her sister. She had her new life. And maybe, just maybe, she had Peter. But most importantly, she had herself. Maria sat in her small kitchen, sipping a cup of tea as the morning sunlight poured in through the window. The past few months had been a whirlwind, a mess of fear, betrayal, and finally, freedom. As she looked around her house, she felt a sense of calm that had been absent for so long. She had made it through the darkness, and now she could breathe again. She thought back to everything that had happened: the black SUV, the constant feeling of being watched, the fear that had followed her like a shadow. But now it was gone. The SUV had disappeared, just like Peter. It was as if they had both vanished from her life, leaving her with a clean slate. Maria took another sip of her tea, her mind drifting to her new job. It was different, quieter, but it was exactly what she needed. The people were kind, the work was manageable, and most importantly, it was far away from the memories of everything she had been through. It was her chance to start over, to build a life that was hers and hers alone. Later that day, Maria decided to go for a walk. She wanted to clear her mind, to take in the fresh air and enjoy the feeling of freedom. She walked through her neighborhood, her eyes catching the familiar faces of her neighbors. She realized she had never really taken the time to get to know them, to connect with the people around her. She stopped in front of Mrs. Lopez's house, her eyes catching the older woman tending to her garden. Maria hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and walked over. "Mrs. Lopez?" Maria called, her voice soft. "Mrs." Lopez looked up, her face lighting up with a smile. "Maria, it's so good to see you, dear. How have you been?" Maria smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I'm doing better, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for always being kind to me. I know I've been a bit distant, but I really appreciate you." Mrs. Lopez's eyes softened, and she reached out, patting Maria's arm gently. "Oh, Maria, you've been through a lot. We all have our moments. I'm just glad to see you smiling again." Maria felt tears welling in her eyes, but they were tears of gratitude, of relief. She nodded, her voice trembling. "Thank you, Mrs. Lopez. That means a lot. They talked for a while longer, just small talk about the neighborhood, the garden, and life in general. It was simple, but it was exactly what Maria needed. She realized she had spent so long isolating herself, hiding from the world out of fear. But now, she was ready to open up, to let people in. That evening, Maria sat in her living room, her eyes scanning the room. It felt different now, warmer, more welcoming. She had rearranged the furniture, added some new decorations, and it felt like a reflection of who she was now. She had let go of the fear, the past, and she was finally ready to move forward. Her phone buzzed, and Maria picked it up, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the message. It was from her sister, Anna. "Hey, just checking in? How are you doing today? Remember, you're stronger than you think. I'm always here for you." Maria smiled, her eyes misting over. She typed a quick reply, her fingers moving across the screen. "Thanks, Anna. I'm doing better. Taking it one step at a time. I'll call you later." She set the phone down, her heart feeling lighter. She knew she still had a long way to go, still had things to work through, but she also knew she wasn't alone. She had her sister, her new job, her neighbors, and most importantly, she had herself. The next day, Maria decided to visit the community center. She had heard they were looking for volunteers, and she thought it might be a good way to get involved, to connect with people. She walked in, her heart pounding slightly as she approached the front desk. "Hi, I'm Maria," she said, her voice steady. "I heard you might need some volunteers." The woman behind the desk smiled warmly, nodding. "Yes, we do. We're always looking for more help. Are you interested in any specific area?" Maria thought for a moment, then smiled. "I'm not sure yet. I want to help, wherever you need me." The woman nodded, her smile widening. "That's wonderful, Maria. We could use someone like you. Let me show you around." Maria followed her, her heart feeling lighter with every step. She knew this was the right decision, knew she needed to be a part of something bigger than herself. It was time to stop hiding, time to start living. A few weeks passed, and Maria found herself slowly rebuilding her life. She was volunteering at the community center, making new friends, reconnecting with her sister. She felt a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging that she hadn't felt in a long time. One afternoon, as she was walking home from the community center, Maria saw a moving truck parked in front of a house down the street. She watched as a family unloaded boxes, their laughter echoing through the quiet street. Maria smiled, feeling a sense of warmth. It was a reminder that life kept moving, that new beginnings were always possible. She walked up to them, her heart pounding slightly. "Hi, I'm Maria. I live just down the street. Welcome to the neighborhood." The woman turned, smiling brightly. "Hi, Maria. Thank you so much. I'm Sarah. It's nice to meet you." Maria spent a few minutes chatting with them, offering to help if they needed anything. As she walked away, she felt a sense of pride. She was no longer the woman who hid in her house, afraid of the world. She was part of this neighborhood, part of this community, and she was ready to live her life fully. That night, Maria sat on her porch, looking up at the stars. She thought about everything she had been through, the fear, the danger, the betrayal. It had been the hardest time of her life, but she had made it through. She had faced her fears, had confronted her past, and had come out stronger on the other side. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, still be moments of doubt and fear. But she also knew she had the strength to face them. She had learned to trust herself, to believe in her own resilience. Maria took a deep breath, the cool night air filling her lungs. She closed her eyes, a smile tugging at her lips. She was ready for whatever came next, ready to start anew, to live her life without fear. For the first time in a long time, Maria felt at peace.